Fallout New Vegas is an RPG developed by Obsidian and published by Bethesda exactly 10 years ago. It is regarded by many as the best Fallout title and one of the best RPGs ever made, and I can safely agree with both. Fallout New Vegas was my first introduction to the Fallout series after I finished reading Fallout Equestria, and as a 14-year-old at Fox, I quite didn't understand why it was so good, why I loved it. But I do now, and it only took me 6 years to fully realize it. I used to prefer Fallout 3 when I was younger because Fallout Equestria was based on Fallout 3, and I did enjoy it a bit more because the story was a bit more straightforward. I don't think Fallout 3 is bad, I think it's a great game, I just think it holds your hand a little bit more, and in a way, New Vegas doesn't. When I was younger, I missed so many things and so many details in Fallout New Vegas. I didn't fully understand Caesar's Legion. I didn't fully understand the problem with the NCR, their imperialism and their bureaucracy. I didn't fully understand the problems of an independent New Vegas. And I missed a lot of great stories like Vault 11 and Bitter Springs. But with all my personal stories and experiences aside, I'm gonna tell you objectively why Fallout New Vegas is such a good and timeless game. We're going to start with the story, what I consider to be the most important thing in a game, at least to me these days. It used to be gameplay, but to me now is the story. The story is obviously set in the Fallout universe, which is extremely huge and heavy just to explain in a small video. But essentially is a post-apocalyptic, retro-futuristic world. Your main character is a courier for the Mojave Express and you're supposed to deliver a package to New Vegas. And as we can see in one of the most iconic and important introductions in video game history, you're shot in the head and you somehow survive. Basically, you're given a second chance, you don't remember anything about who you were in your life, and the story seems simple at first, like find who shot you in the head. It is way more robust and complicated than that. I think New Vegas is the best example of it's not the destination, but the journey it takes to get there. Like many other Fallout games, New Vegas is filled with side missions. In almost every town you visit, in unmarked locations, in large locations, large settlements, NPCs, important characters, small outposts, everything, you're going to find side missions everywhere. In total, New Vegas has about 250 quests, and my completionist playthrough of New Vegas took about 180 hours to complete. But I digress, a game's quality is not measured by its open world or the amount of quests it has. There's also, from the moment you wake up, you start hearing about the upcoming battle of Hoover Dam, and there's obviously interesting factions, really cool and well written factions like Caesar's Legion, the NCR, that's the New California Republic, Yes Man, that will be an independent New Vegas of some sorts, and Mr. House. And of course, 4 pieces of DLCs, which each one of them tells their own individual story, but all of them are connected. Each has something to say, and each one of them has a great self-contained story, world building, aesthetics, immersion, and I think each one of them brings a lot to the table, and the story wraps up nicely in Lonesome Road. Each one is great for a different reason. Dead Money is an unforgiving and cruel journey about human greed and cruelty, and a pre-war story about envy and how people are forced to deal with others' mistakes. Honest Hearts is about imperialism and manipulation, retribution, rebuilding. It has a great world map and individual stories as well as great characters. Old World Blues has a great aesthetic, it has a great world, it has a great map, great characters, amazing writing, an awesome pre-war gruesome mystery untouched by time, and a human story about how people are unable to forget. And finally, the climax, Lonesome Road, is kind of the final showdown. It has like some sort of morbid curiosity is what motivates this DLC. It's about destruction, war, the nuclear apocalypse, how the roads we travel and the experiences we gather forge who we are and how we deal with things as well as our ideals. No one is the way that they are just because. The stories in general tackle not only the DLCs, like the whole story tackles philosophy, anthropology, what humans are capable to do to each other, one's ability to defend our philosophies or point of views, and in general what the average person is capable of doing. And the story and the endings are still being discussed 10 years later. Recently I was doing my playthrough, and I usually side with the NCR. It's like my favorite faction in general in Fallout, and I was still considering other options, like what would be best for the Mojave. How do you pronounce it? Vegas? Vegas? But it's not all about story. I also think New Vegas has an excellent gameplay. It does have some problems like the speech skill, but that's a problem in general with the Fallout series and many other RPGs. But I think the gameplay in New Vegas, it's really good. It has really good RPG mechanics, skills, perks, role-playing capabilities, weapons, great build potential. It has good combat and satisfying storytelling, as well as environmental storytelling. A lot of the locations you're gonna find in New Vegas tell their own story with just objects, and sometimes not even notes or holotapes, just objects. And I think it's great combining the gameplay with the storytelling. It makes you feel like this world is alive, like you are part of this world. You're not like the character, you're not like the main character, you're just a person existing in this world. Like, you are probably going to change it. The courier is considered the wild card, pun intended, in the whole story. But at the end of the day, you're still a courier walking down some dusty desert roads. I also want to take time to mention the aesthetics. I think it has great cultural influences and music. Fallout New Vegas is obviously a western. It was inspired by westerns, by the American Wild West and American culture in general, just like any other Fallout game. I just think New Vegas is more inspired in the American Wild West. It's obviously a retro-futuristic game. It has extremely old things like radios and televisions, as well as some other consumables like cereal and snacks, as well as a lot of old weapons and weaponry in general, like revolvers, repeaters, and a lot of World War II era rifles and pistols, and even shotguns, as well as Vietnam era weapons, including grenade launchers and rifles. No matter where you are, no matter where you're playing, even in DLCs, in some futuristic DLCs, quote unquote, like Old War Blues, you still get the feeling of those 1960s sci-fi movies. When you're in the Divide, you still feel this Vietnam era like aesthetic and feeling. When you're in the Strip, you're showered with 1950s Las Vegas memorabilia, music, aesthetics, clothing, casinos, everything. The game takes a lot of inspiration, like I said, from the American Wild West, but also from 1940s, 1950s, early 60s America, as well as the Vietnam era America. It also has great music and great soundtrack. There are different things. The soundtrack transports the player to the Mojave Desert, and it is great for immersion. You really feel like you are in the heart of the Mojave Desert. And the happy radio music is a strong contrast to the soundtrack and the world. It makes it feel like an adventure even. While you got really upbeat, incredibly iconic country songs like Big Iron, you also have really depressing dark country songs like Johnny Guitar. I also like that a lot of the quests are even named after songs. Beside all of the factions, you also have the very iconic Desert Rangers, which you can find in the cover of the game. And just as I think the Desert Rangers are super iconic to the game, I also think the other factions are as well. And it is not only the aesthetics when it comes to the other factions. We all know Caesar's Legion was influenced by Roman culture. Mr. House is an extremely capitalist, like extremely 1960s capitalist businessman who's also an autocrat. The NCR brings pre-war values like democracy, and with democracy comes bureaucracy, to a post-apocalyptic world, and how challenging that can be. It brings up a lot of moral dilemmas even. Do pre-war philosophy and pre-war ideals apply to a post-apocalyptic world? This is so good. I'm not gonna get into it. The role playing and immersion are amazing. There are so many possibilities. You wanna be a cowgirl? You wanna be a cowboy? A cow person? You can. Do you prefer energy and futuristic weapons and gadgets rather than a dusty hat and a revolver? You can absolutely go with that as well. You prefer to serve Vegas? Go ahead. You prefer the just like the soldier mentality and lifestyle? You can go with that as well. Do you embrace the survivalist, almost Mad Max like lifestyle of living in the Mojave wasteland? You can also do that as well. Do you live to serve the Caesar? Yes, you can. You can go with everything, anything you want. And every playthrough of New Vegas I've done is different. One of my favorites I've done was like a military like character who strongly believed in the NCR. Well, I as a person don't agree with everything the NCR says or does. Like, for example, the NCR's biggest critics are some of the same NCR soldiers and people who participate in their chain of command, or people like Rose of Sharon Cassidy. I do not agree with everything the NCR does. I think imperialism is wrong. I think bureaucracy is extremely bad for the Mojave. But as my character who was extremely loyal to the NCR, it's basically everything to my character was the NCR. And it was one of my favorites. I really enjoyed it. I also wanted to mention how important like the player's headcanon is, like the role playing you do with your character. It helps a lot to enhance the experience. You name your character, you add like quirks or things they like to do or things they don't like doing, the weapons you're gonna use, what clothing you're wearing, etc. In my newest playthrough, I was really embracing the cowgirl lifestyle of my character, and I'm limiting myself to sleeping outdoors and in like dusty places, only using cowboy repeaters and lever action rifles and shotguns, as well as only revolvers. And I'm really trying not to use like futuristic weapons. I'm not trying to use grenades. I'm sticking with dynamite and machetes, and I even added like small quirks to like enhance my experience. This may sound extremely stupid to you, but it is really fun to me. I added even like little quirks, like my character doesn't eat pre-war food, things like that. Like I said, it's a lot of fun, and I think each player's like headcanon and like ability to roleplay in this game really enhance the experience. And with everything I've mentioned, gameplay, story, soundtrack, aesthetics, world building, characters, factions, moral dilemmas, builds, role-playing, everything, I think that's why New Vegas is such an excellent game. It will be a 9.9 out of 10 because nothing is ever perfect. It does have a few problems, but I think it's such a great game. I think it's timeless. 10 years later, it's still a solid RPG with great stories, both main and side, as well as individual character stories, the player headcanon, environmental stories, like I said, pre-war stories, post-war stories, the DLC with genuine dilemmas, moral dilemmas, pros and cons, flaws and strengths. In general, I do think this game is timeless. 10 years later, I still find myself playing it and thinking it's a better written game than most of the newer games that are coming out. If you go to the Nexus mod page, you're still gonna find an active community. It's great. I don't think I have to keep saying it, it's great. And well, on a more personal note, it was my introduction to the Fallout series, originally inspired by a book called Fallout Equestria, but it was my first introduction to the Fallout series. It was the first game that made me think about my decisions, and as someone who really loves the American Wild West and the whole cowboy culture thing, I really enjoyed this game. When I was younger, it made me look into the Vietnam conflict, and I even wrote a 50-page script defending the NCR in kind of not justifying but trying to explain why bureaucracy and like small imperialism was better than an independent New Vegas, because an independent New Vegas comes with anarchy, comes with a lack of knowledge about nation building, about borders, about economics and everything. And obviously it's better to me that Caesar's Legion, because Caesar's Legion is an extremely misogynistic, violent faction that it is doomed to fail. They conquer, they kill, enslave, and conquer. And when they do not have anything else to conquer, they're gonna start conquering themselves. And people don't really think about that. And it also makes me think a lot about Robert House. Robert House is an autocrat who kind of legitimately kept New Vegas safe and who kind of deserves New Vegas, but I don't know if he should be like the leader of the whole Mojave because he only cares about Vegas. He doesn't care about the entirety of the desert, only about Vegas, only about himself. And with it comes a lot of problems like with autocrats. Autocrats can make really, really good decisions, but the problem is it's just one person. It's an autocracy. If House dies, Vegas dies. You see things like that. I'm not really gonna get into it. It's extremely heavy and extremely long, and there are already a lot of great discussions out there you can go and watch because I'm not gonna add anything to the table. I do prefer the NCR though. But that's it on a personal note, and that's why I think New Vegas is such a great game. It's such a timeless, awesomely written RPG, and why it is my favorite game of all time. Thank you so much for watching. This was kind of a lengthy video, but thank you so much for watching. Wear a mask, wash your hands, and I sincerely hope you have a great day.